What's poppin', everybody? Welcome back to SSPN, not solo edition, with Ethan and Jude. I'm glad to be back with you, Ethan. The solos are fun, but still, it's not the same when you have somebody to bounce ideas off of and all that type of stuff.
1,000%. And selfishly, it hurts my throat so bad to do a solo podcast. So it's nice to throw it to you, and I feel that little tickle come on.
I've listened to the two solos I listened to. I was feeling the what's the word? The I was feeling your pain. I'll put it that
Right?
way. I was with you in your journey of having to drink water and power through.
I appreciate that, Jude. I hope that the fans understood the pain as well.
But we do have some stuff to talk about. I mean, shoot, I'm just going to go to our YouTube page to kind of refresh myself of the last time that the past couple things that we talked about. I know you did a solo pregame
Right.
last Tuesday, which I believe I don't. Well, here we're going to the channel. I'm about to pull it up.
Let's do it.
Which was before the Nuggets game. Yeah, I wasn't sure if it was the
That's
Nuggets.
right.
And that was also right after the Spurs announced that Jeremy Sohan and Devin Vassell will be out for the season. And then the last one that I did before that was 4 days, and that was the Knicks post game, which was actually a really fun, incredible game. And I went for an hour on that just because we had a bunch of people on. And that was just with Jalen Brunson scoring 60 and then Victor having the type of game he did and the full team effort, being able to overcome that. And I believe that also was the 3-game win streak, which was our longest of the season. So those were the last two. Those were the last two post games, or the last two lives, excuse me, that we did. So since then, let's go ahead and pull up the schedule here, Ethan, as I get to the right tab. Since then, the Spurs have played the Pelicans, which they won that one, 111-109. I did not get to watch that one because of work. I also did not get to watch the Sixers game, which was a competitive loss, at least looking at the score. I don't know what the full game was because I also worked that game. And then I think that was the same thing with the Grizzlies and the Thunder as well, Ethan. That was like 2 weeks where they were playing on nights that I worked. Or no. What am I talking about? That was the back-to-back this week, Ethan.
Right.
So I did get to watch the Grizzlies game, and I sat through like 3.5 quarters of the Thunder game and then turned it off with 5 minutes left. But the more important thing is, Ethan, this is the season finale. I mean, we got 2 games left. We got the Nuggets tomorrow, and then we've got the most important game of the season against the Detroit Pistons to end it all off.
Yeah, it's been a kind of a fun little stretch here down at the end, Jude, because of Jeremy and Devin and a couple other guys being out. We've seen some shine from some of our other players. Devontae Graham was the star of the New Orleans game. Wemby, of course, had his phenomenal game against Tyrese in the Philly game, which I actually watched. And you're right, it was competitive start to finish. Probably one of the best games of the season. And then Memphis, I didn't get to watch, but it was the Mamu rebound game. Or I think I watched like the second half or something like that. But that was the 16 rebounds for Mamu. And then OKC, we saw what happened. We can get into it in a second. But right, the Denver-Detroit finish. I think it's really going to come down to, can we get a win against Detroit? I think Denver we could pretty much write off as a loss,
Right.
Jude. Especially since they're trying to get ready for the playoffs. They have Jokic. I'm pretty sure Murray will play as well. He's coming off of an injury. They're trying to get his fatigue right. So we're really banking on this Sunday game, April 14th. The what would you call this? The battle of the what?
It's the toilet bowl. I hate to say
bowl. Let's do that.
I hate to say it. That's what it is.
No,
it's the bottom team in the West versus the bottom team in the East.
Tickets as low as $30, Jude, which is only $7 less than the Denver game.
I'm going, Ethan. I'm there.
Are you really?
No.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Not yet. Maybe. We'll see. Not yet, though. I do not have tickets. And I'm realizing, and since we haven't done this in a while, I'm kind of getting back into rhythm here, to be honest with you. That Sixers game I did watch. I don't know what I'm talking about. It was the Pelicans and the Nuggets games that I worked for, because that Sixers game was insane with Tyrese Halliburton having 50. And I didn't get to watch all of it, but I watched like the majority of the third quarter, the fourth quarter, and then the 2 overtimes. Like that was the other thing. And that I don't want to go over it, but this is the last thing I'll say. After that Julian 3 in that game, right before the end of the fourth quarter, the way that we just let Tyrese Maxey have a wide open lane for an easy layup on that inbounds pass, that was, oh, that hurt me, man. You can talk about a lot of other things in overtime, but that's the thing that kind of sticks out to me. And to be honest, it's kind of a representation of the season a little bit in a sense. But regardless of even that, Ethan, if you just look at the games since the 3-game win streak, I mean, all of our losses other than last night against the Thunder, which was basically the Austin Spurs against the Thunder, to be fair. So
Mhm.
nixing that one, all of our losses have been single digits, you know, and very competitive games. So it really has been nice to kind of see down the stretch. And this is kind of what we talked about. It's eerily similar to
Mhm.
last season, Ethan, not just in the sense that we're playing guys like Raekwon Gray, Sidy Cissoko, David Duke Jr., Jamari Bouya, but also in the sense that because some other teams are resting guys maybe against us. Now, like you said, that's not going to happen in the Nuggets game tomorrow. But in some of these other ones, who did we just? Well, Embiid was out, for example, against the
Mhm.
Sixers. Um, there were some more wins that showed up for the Spurs. And some of those really is to their credit, especially when you go back to that 104-102 Phoenix win, you know, without Victor. Um, but still, it's kind of, as we kind of said, going into this last stretch, there was a chance that just as the season winds down in these type of situations, there's going to be more opportunities for a team like the Spurs to win games. And we saw that last year. We're seeing it again this year.
Yeah, 100%. We're the kings of April when everyone else is kind of winding down. We're winding back up. And it's also something to be said to what you kind of alluded to, giving guys opportunities that didn't necessarily have, consistent minutes during the season. I think Mamu Kelashvili has really, I mean, he did this last season, so we shouldn't be surprised. But I think
Right.
during the year, he was kind of hot and cold, didn't play that often. It was kind of inconsistent spot minutes here and there. So we're like, okay, maybe he's just not ready. Maybe there's better options. Maybe last year it was a fluke. But then he comes in, gets his 16 boards, gets up to like 20 points, I think, in one game. He's had a heck of a run here to kind of finish off the year with meaningful time. And same can be said for Trey Jones. I know he's been good all year, but he's kind of come alive as a scoring option late. Devonte Graham, and then of course Malachi Branham had a 24-point game against the Nuggets, the game that I previewed. I know we still lost 110 to 105, but he was huge, replacing Devin Vassell. So it's moments like that, little glimpses into guys' play that have kind of helped ease the pain of not having Devin and Jeremy and Keldon out there. Um, but the fact that we're able to be competitive with really only Wembanyama being that star player on the roster right now says a lot about some of these depth guys, and says a lot about Coach Pop still being one of the best at elevating role players and what's the word I'm looking for? Try like
Developing,
developing players' will to win, if that makes sense. And another
getting that
guy,
drive in him.
right, right. And one guy that I have to give a quick shout out to is your boy David Duke Jr. Like he's actually like, I mean, I've watched highlights of him in Austin, but I have to admit I've never watched a full Austin game like Jude. Jude takes a lot of time to really analyze those guys and watch their development, but he's a bona fide scorer and shooter. Like he's got a nice stroke, and I know he didn't have crazy stats, but he looks comfortable out there for a guy that had zero real Spurs minutes up until the last like 3 games. So uh, he's looked very comfortable. I'm happy with what he's been able to provide us late.
I know it's only these 2 games, and if you just looked at the stats, but you know it doesn't look like much, especially when you look at the OKC
Mhm.
game. But you got to take into account the context, and you know it's funny you mentioned that because I even had some other friends that were talking about like they like in the Thunder game they were like start David Duke in the second half, like.
Right.
Um, but he's really been killing it in the G League, averaging about 20 points. At least over the past. I know he's averaging 19 overall, like in the season, but over the past month or so, it's got to be at least like 22 or 25.
Hmm.
Um, but yeah, he's someone, I talked about it before, how maybe there's a potential that he could be the third string shooting guard next year. We'll have to wait and see. Um, but at the same time, there's a reason that he's been, he's been top 20 in the G League in scoring. I mean, even before we signed him.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, that really kind of wraps up all the stuff that we've missed, I guess you could say.
Mm-hmm.
There's really not. I know that we played the Nuggets close last time, Ethan, but there's really not too much to break down with that. I think that's going to be a completely different game. And the other thing is, let me pull this up real quick. Let's check the Spurs injury report for this game, Ethan. Oh my goodness. Jeremy Sohan, Devin Vassell, Dominic Barlow, Keldon Johnson, Chetty Osman. Obviously, Mamu has been playing a lot. He has been doing some good things out there, like you mentioned, but still, I would say that Dominic Barlow definitely helps our team defense. I think we've learned that this year when he's on the floor. But more importantly, all of the other guys, rotation players, all season long. It's not going to be a good one. Even with Victor in, I don't see it. If they make this game competitive, I will be impressed. I know they did last time, but I think they had a little bit more of the guys that were not on this injury report.
Yeah, it's going to be a tough one. I think the most glaring thing that's missing from our team, well, two things. One, when Wemby wasn't playing, especially in the last game, we just have no one that could go get you a bucket. Like, even Chetty Osman, like, when all else fails, he can get you something, but we don't even have him. So we're relying on David Duke Jr. and Blake Wesley and Malachi. And Malachi is probably the most proficient of those three, but he struggled against OKC. Really, the whole team did. So it's going to take a valiant effort to make this even competitive. Wembanyama is going to have to be unbelievable. Like, he's going to have to single-handedly win this game, which is sort of kind of what he did last time looking at these stats. But Trey Jones also played well. Malachi played well. You just have to hope that the shooters are knocking down their shots. And Julian Champagnie, I forgot to even mention him. I
Yes.
think before OKC, in the last 5-game stretch, he was averaging 14 points per game on efficient shooting. Obviously, that went down after the Oklahoma City game because everybody shot so poorly. But he's been a blessing in disguise, and hopefully he can have a bounce-back game as well because he's been extremely important without Keldon, Devin, and all those guys that you mentioned.
I mean, here you go. You've got 4 straight games with double digits for Julian, and hitting a 3 in all of those games as well. That Philly game, man, I feel bad for him because I feel like we talked about it earlier because that should have been the game-winning shot, and it would have been a cool story too because we picked him up from, of course, the world-renowned Delaware Bluecoats, Ethan.
Of course.
That's where Mac McClung started too. I'm sorry to interrupt you, but I mean, it's just he's the G League MVP, man. They just pump out, even if they don't stay on the Sixers. They pump out dudes.
They're the process, man. That's what they do.
You're exactly right. And you can even see a little bit back to the end of March there, had 12 points and 17 points against New York and Utah as well. So a nice end of the season for Champagnie. A little bit of that, or really, I mean, a lot of it does have to do with Devin and Jeremy getting shut down. So there's more shots for him. But still, it's not like he's just bricking everything at the same time.
He looks a little more comfortable and confident too. Maybe that has to do with the fact that they're not there, so he feels like he can take opportunities that maybe he felt like he couldn't take before. But he's putting the ball on the floor. He had a vicious dunk. Was it 2 games ago or a game ago? I can't remember which.
I might have missed that one when I was working.
I missed it too. I watched the highlights, so I'm getting lost in which highlight it was. But going down the lane, threw it down. It wasn't a poster, but it was like a brush poster kind of thing. So he's starting to feel himself a little bit more, which I'm happy to see because he had confidence in the summer league, and he kind of lost it a little bit, kind of as we got into the year. So I'm happy that he's finally starting to refine it.
Yeah. I mean, in this situation, Ethan, you gotta take into account the context, and you gotta take the little things, where you can find them. And it's not like we're saying that Julian Champagnie is going to be an all-star next season.
No,
we're just saying that in this situation, I mean, look, as much as Mamu's played really well, he shot 0 for last night.
Right.
And that does, granted, no Victor. You know what I mean? Like, you got to mention that as well. That was a really tough situation for everybody last night. David Duke was 2 for 8 as well when we pulled him up. but Julian hasn't had a game like that. You know what I mean, for example.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. For sure.
But I think another theme that we're seeing, and you mentioned this in your last pregame, I believe, and this ties into the injury report we just mentioned. The Spurs, after that 3-game win streak, have decided, even though we've still managed to get 2 wins after that because of Victor, right?
Mm-hmm.
And obviously some other guys like Malachi showed up in a lot of those games. Like I don't want to just take it completely that, but we all know without Victor in that situation, there would be no chance whatsoever. But
Right.
still got to give credit to the other guys around him because if they don't have the games, there's still those non-wins. But you're seeing us hold guys out even more. Like I think Keldon ended up playing 1 game, and granted, he actually legit did get hurt in the game. And I think at that point they're probably just going to hold him out for the rest of the year, which I don't blame them. Because Ethan, I think the other thing that we need to look at is the draft odds right now. We are on the brink of that the highest odds right now. We are tied with the Charlotte Hornets. And I think that there will be a tiebreaker if we finish with the same record as them at number 3. And at that point, that's just out of our hands. That just is what it is. But I think the Spurs, with their decision making, are really trying to hold on to those top 3 odds. And it's kind of like we made that clip earlier in the year, Ethan. Just you can call it the stealth tank or whatever you want to call it. It's not even really stealth. Like that's why I mentioned Barlow's team defense, because it's like when you're holding. Not saying Barlow would make a huge difference, but
Right.
like they're holding him out for a reason. Like I was texting you about that, but anyways, I mean, and even in some of the other games, like as much as I've seen some pictures from Devin and Jeremy, and it seems like there is like legit procedural stuff, it still feels like to me that if we were in the middle of a playoff push, they would finish the season and then do that after. Because when they were on the court, it wasn't like the Keldon injury where you could legit see it, or even like the Bassey injury earlier in the year. You know, it was just like all of a sudden they're not playing and they're out for the year.
I mean, I think honestly, we would even be resting Victor Wembanyama if he wasn't such a competitive maniac and literally refusing publicly to sit out the rest of the year. Like Pop even alluded to the fact that he was not happy that he had to sit out last game, which, to be fair to the Spurs, like he hasn't played back to backs in a little while, so it wasn't like a conscious decision, like we're gonna make you sit so we lose, but he wanted to play. So I think if he wasn't that maniac, he'd probably be sitting as well.
Yeah, and he has a legit little ankle tweak, I think,
True.
as well. As much as it's nothing crazy, like at this point in the season, like and in a back-to-back, if you even your ankle's just like not 100% and it's our prized possession for the future,
Right.
like we don't need to send him out there with the Austin Spurs to try to 1v5 the Thunder. You know what I mean?
Yep.
Because he's going to go out there and try super hard,
Because it's Chet too. Like he would hurt himself to try and dunk on Chet, unfortunately. So I'm glad we held him out for the record.
Yeah. So that's what the Spurs are really doing going into the rest of this season, Ethan. I'm trying to think of other thoughts that I have, but I mean, man, you've got the Nuggets game tomorrow night, and maybe by another miracle it's competitive, but I seriously doubt that, because even Shetty played last game. Like he's not going to play in this one, unless one of the Austin Spurs just really shows out. And then you've got the Detroit game, which will probably be competitive. But I think the importance of the Detroit game will depend on who Charlotte plays next. So let me go ahead and look at their schedule, because in all likelihood, we lose to the Nuggets tomorrow, right? And that puts us at 20-61. The other thing, with our 20th win, not to go all over the place, but we have avoided officially, even if we lose out, and it's technically still tied for the worst record in franchise history, by getting our 20th win, Ethan, we are officially not solely the worst team in Spurs history, which is really what I wanted.
Let's go. It's surprising because we basically have the same team as last year, but with a generational talent, yet we still have the same exact record, which shows you how important chemistry is.
That would be, what would be funny is if we win out and we literally have the same record as last year. Because we were 22-60.
Yep. That would be crazy.
Oh, geez, Ethan. This is not looking good for the Hornets odds. They just beat the Hawks, and I think Brandon Miller had a really good game.
He did.
But guess who they play tomorrow?
Boston.
Yep. And guess who they play on Sunday?
East or West?
East.
Milwaukee.
No, but close.
New York?
Back to Milwaukee. Cold.
Cold. Like geographically?
Geographically close to Milwaukee.
Chicago?
Close. Very close. But no.
Indiana?
You're right there. No, you're right there. You're right there. You're literally you're in the Midwest.
Cleveland?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I literally named every team but the right one.
Hey, but you were on track. All of them were in the geography.
I know my states.
But yeah, I think we're gonna probably have to hope for somehow. Or I mean, I'm not gonna hope for the Boston win, and they're both on the road too. But we're gonna have to hope for like the only way looking at that the Spurs will be guaranteed the third. You know, they would have the third worst record, which would be tied for the highest possible lottery odds. Is if we lose out and they win one of these two. So you see how it looks way more likely for us to probably win that Detroit game, and then we would be number 4, which, I mean, that's not the worst scenario, but it's not what the Spurs, would prefer, I'm sure.
Let's just hope and pray, because Boston's safely at the first seed, so let's hope that they rest a
That's
lot of their
true.
guys. Cleveland is another story, because I think Donovan's trying to work his way out of an injury slump that he's in, so he'll probably play, but maybe Boston rests everybody. But what's that dude's name? Luke Cornett. Maybe that's their starting center. Maybe they have a chance.
Well, you know what? I mean, let me go ahead and look at the injury report, because if the Spurs have one out, the only person on Boston's injury report is O'Shea Brissett.
Well, maybe not.
Play the me menu music. That's how I feel after.
How does that go?
That. Do 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 do.
Great.
Oh my gosh. But, something we haven't talked about, I brought up his stats a little bit, but M-Easy says, can't wait to see more of Sidy. And Sidy had 14 points last night, 5 boards, I believe, 3 assists, something like that. But in the last game, also had double digits. In the Memphis game, more importantly, because the OKC game, you can kind of throw out, honestly, in general. Like, even the 14 points, a lot of it was in garbage time when OKC just put in all their G Leaguers, too. And I'm not trying to take away from him, because it's still, like, nice to see. And there were still some things that I just, objectively watching him, even against the starters sometimes, that I still liked and were positives that you could kind of see from the previous game against Memphis. But, yeah, I've liked what I've seen from him so far. We texted about it. It really isn't anything brand new, whenever it comes to maybe our takes on him, if you will. But it's been nice to see his game look like it translates a little bit. Granted, the Memphis game was kind of against the Memphis G League team too, for being honest. No Jaren Jackson Jr. It was the Memphis Hustle and the Austin Spurs plus Wemby, for being real. But still, I have liked what I have seen from Sidy in his minutes. He plays hard. He's got the physicality that's imposing, even though he's only 20 years old. And I just think he has the passes he makes and the way that he fights for extra boards as well. And as I mentioned, his physicality, a lot of dunks from him and like kind of dunking on people. He dunked on Scottie Pippen Jr.
Right.
So I love to see the athleticism and the flashes of skills. It just looks like somebody that when you put him in the Spurs development system, I could see him being a second round gem, man. I really could. I don't want to, overinflate what he could be, but at the same time, I think he has a decently high ceiling.
Oh, for sure. I mean, knock on wood for him. He got a guaranteed contract, so I don't think that take is hot necessarily. I think that's a pretty safe bet for him. And if you think about it, Trey Jones is a second round pick, and I would say Sidy Cissoko has a higher upside than Trey Jones, and we've seen what Trey Jones has been able to provide this team as a starting point guard. So Sidy Cissoko, I think, has been exactly what was advertised, what we thought he would be, especially, or at least to start, high energy player, high motor, fights for extra possessions, like you said, cuts well, runs the floor, highly athletic. Always tries to dunk the ball if he can, kind of like Blake Wesley. Like if he's going to the rim, he's not going to try and finger roll. He's going to try and slam it down. two-handed slams, I might add. He has a lot to his game. He's not trying to do too much. He doesn't make mistakes. High IQ player. He's not doing anything spectacular, but I think it's more of a positive, especially for a guy coming from the G League, if they're just not sticking out and if they're finding comfortability in the lineup, and not looking lost. I think that's the biggest positive for him. Um, Negative, I really don't have one because we know his deficiencies. We know he has to get better as a shooter. We know he's not going to be an ISO scorer. That's just not who he is right now. And obviously, chemistry will have to improve as he gets more minutes. But I've been pleasantly surprised with how many points and rebounds, like how he's been able to fill the stat sheet despite not having a lot of those skills yet, still being a raw player.
And you see it in the eye test too, just with the way he plays. And I see A Spleen. I know he's talked about his shooting a little bit in a couple of our other episodes. And he says, I don't think it'll translate in a real contending team without a jump shot below 25% from three at the G League level. Here's what I'll say. 20-year-old Sidy Cissoko, A Spleen, completely agree with you. But 24-year-old Sidy Cissoko could be a completely different story. We've seen as much as Jeremy, it's nothing crazy. We've seen him take jumps. We've seen other guys take jumps, Trey Jones towards the end of the season. But also that's not necessarily like the main like strength of CD's game. Like, yes, he does take some threes. We've talked about it. He's gone 5 for 6 in some G League games. He's gone 3 for 6. You know, he's also had 1 for 6 games as well. But they just want him to keep shooting. And it's something he needs to get better at, like you said. But really his game is when he drives to the rim, he's physically imposing. He can make acrobatic passes. Like you said, he can cut as well. And he just plays hard and brings a bunch of intensity. And like you said, I think you mentioned like him saying that Trey Jones is a second round pick and he might have a higher ceiling than him. Think about it this way. And I know we were just talking about Champagnie and how we like him, but if I'm being honest, like I think, and this may be crazy, you know, people might, I don't know. I mean, tell me what you think of this. I don't think it's that crazy to say that he has a higher ceiling than Julian.
No, not at all crazy. Not at all crazy. I mean, there were some mock drafts before last year's draft that had him going late first round. And I could totally have seen him be one of those guys that you just reach for. Like not to disrespect this gentleman, but we reached for Luka Samanic, who was slotted for second round, but we thought he had enough upside to take him in the first round. Totally could have seen that happen with CD. And I think CD has more skills at his disposal right now than Luka did in his rookie year. And Sidy Cissoko is an underrated ball handler too, especially in transition. I would say where he is at 20 is actually better than where Jeremy was at 20 as a ball handler. And you could argue even right now, just strictly as a guy that can face you up and take you off the dribble, I might say CD's a little bit better than Jeremy Sohan. Obviously, Jeremy's a better scorer right now. Better.
I totally get what you're saying.
You know what I'm saying? So the sky is a limit for Sidy Cissoko. It just all goes back to what he's willing to do in the offseason, how much work he's able to put in. He seems like a hard worker. I really don't know. We haven't had that much exposure to him in post-game conferences or anything like that, so it's hard to tell. But he's a Frenchman, and we know Frenchmen can improve their jump shot, i.e. Tony Parker, Boris Diaw, etc., etc. Nicholas Batum is another one. Fournier. And I think that the jump shot, the jump shot's a funny thing because if you're bad at the three, it's extremely glaring. Like everyone can tell, they sag off you, and you immediately are like, oh, he's a bad player. He can't shoot the three. But it's also probably the easiest thing to get better at. You know what I mean? Like you can get in the gym and shoot 1,000 shots and get better as a three-point shooter. But it's the other skill sets that come so naturally to CD that are difficult to learn, like the high IQ play, the passing, the defense, and just being a physical being that he was born with that body. Like that's not something that you can learn.
Yeah, absolutely. And you know, that's why they gave him a 3-year contract, even though he was a second round pick. And I remember Brian Wright, whenever they had the press conference, you remember the introductory press conference with him and Wemby on the Riverwalk?
Yeah, I do.
Yeah. And Brian Wright talked about, you know, we felt like, as in the Spurs, felt very lucky to get CD at the 12th pick in the second round.
Right.
So I don't think that it's like, oh my gosh, he's going to be an all-star next season or anything. But like I said earlier, a 24-year-old Sidy Cissoko, it's kind of like we talk about with Jeremy. You know, there's a lot of potential in a lot of different areas. And if, you know, obviously there's like the what's the word? There's the ceiling, the best possible scenario, and then there's the floor, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
And in a situation where he continues to get better at all of those skills, that's why earlier you said like the sky is the limit. As much as it's, we're just talking about a guy that's mainly played in the G League, that's kind of the reasoning there.
Most definitely.
But yeah, man, I don't want to dive too much into the off season because I'm sure once the season officially ends, we'll do like a big, full
Mm-hmm.
episode where we kind of preview everything. But what are some other things that you're kind of thinking of just kind of late in the year right now?
One of the things on my mind is Defensive Player of the Year. I know that's not
There
quite
you go.
off season, but it's something that everyone's talking about right now. Um, I think Wembanyama's argument should, as the Spurs organization, all they should send to the league and to the voters is the clip of three Grizzlies driving on a fast break as a 3-on-1 with Wemby under the rim, and not one of them wanted to shoot it. And they eventually settled, or they passed to the corner guy who pump fake. He drove it inside on Wemby. But regardless, you could see the fear in all three of those players to take it at Wembanyama, who has more rebounds and steals than the last two DPOYs combined. And when he's on the court, we're a top 5 defense. When he's off, he's like bottom 30. We're bottom 30, so his impact is definitely prevalent. I understand the argument for Rudy Gobert, and even Wemby has said Rudy Gobert probably will win it this year because they're a much better team. They've been the best
Right.
defensive team all year. But it's hard because Wemby, I think, so clearly, even to people that are Rudy Gobert voters, Wemby is so clearly the best individual defender, straight up. But this is a political award, and it's also sort of kind of a team award, and I think people are going to give it to Rudy because of those reasons.
Yeah, I'm not expecting Victor to win it. Just bluntly. But I think he should. I think he should. If we're just talking about like the award itself, Defensive Player of the Year. I mean, look at the defensive rating for the Spurs. And I know stats aren't everything, but defensive rating and the eye test. Look
Mm-hmm.
at what the Spurs look like defensively when we sub in Zach Collins. And I'm not trying to take a shot at Zach there. It's just the truth, this season.
It's like two different teams when he's on the court and when he's off the court.
Yep, absolutely. Did you see the clip that was floating around Twitter last night? It was Christian Braun dunking on Rudy Gobert, and
Mm-hmm.
then it was Christian Braun driving on Wemby and like driving out. Like instead of going and taking a shot, I saw people were using that kind of as an argument. I mean, and that's not this is the end all be all that decides it, but that's kind of an example. Like when Christian Braun drives on Rudy, he can go get a poster. When he drives on Wemby, he just is like, never mind, I'm leaving.
Right, right. I mean, they're both fantastic. I don't want to disrespect Rudy
Right.
Gobert. Like either way, I think they'll both be 1 and 2. But I would agree with you. Rudy Gobert will win it this year. It's a shame because it's a shame that we've been so bad. Because I feel like
Right.
as a team, we probably I say we're not on the team. As a team, they let Wembanyama down a little bit by not being better and not giving him a better argument for winning. But Brian Windhorst, God bless him, is doing everything in his power to make people vote for Victor Wembanyama.
Did you see what Shaq said too? He
What did
like
he?
changed. He said now that he should win it.
Well, he hates Rudy Gobert.
And well, it's but anyways, I was talking about the Bol thing.
Oh
Like you
yeah, no,
can't you
he's
can't go
completely
from what
flipped.
you said about Bol to now be like, oh, now no doubt Wemby should win.
Right, 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 right.
I think
But
that's what he said. To be honest, I,
it
I think I
probably is.
just saw a headline or like a tweet about it or something. I didn't actually watch, so maybe might be wrong there,
Definitely
but
flipped.
I'm
But
pretty sure that's what he said.
I think it's a pretty safe bet though that he will make all defensive second team as the center. Would you think that as well? I don't think there's anybody else who
Yeah,
give it to.
yeah. I mean, there's I don't. I mean, look, the dude's what since the All Star break, he's averaging like at least 4+ blocks, right? I saw something about
I
that.
think something like 3.5, 4. Yeah,
Yeah, he's leading the league in blocks too.
yeah, yeah. No, it's absolutely insane.
And I saw another stat. I sent this. Bear with me here. This is on my phone somewhere, but I believe it was like the comparison. It was something else with Rudy Gobert and Victor, and I think it had to do with block stats.
I think it was. I think I saw this. It was 4 players. It was blocks, steals, and then like defensive efficiency with them on the court. And Wemby like cleared Rudy. Bam and somebody else. I think it's Anthony Davis. Was that the one you're talking about?
No, it was a comparison in like the amount of blocks that Rudy and Victor had, but I'm having some trouble finding it. But what I'm not having some trouble finding is that Sham God move that he
Mhm.
did in the Memphis game, and then he did the spin after that for an easy lay. That was so tough. Um, and we also another thing I'm seeing here just when I'm looking through my Twitter, we in that Grizzlies game we also ran. Noah Magaro George tweeted about this. We ran some inverted horns pick and roll sets where Blake Wesley and Devonte Graham were the two screeners and Wemby was the ball handler. So and that's another thing that we've kind of seen throughout the end of this season is the way that I mean we've seen his passing all year, but now we're just trying stuff like that. And I mean think about a inverted pick and roll set and maybe, well, now that I think about it, it depends on who you'd want there. But I was originally what was coming to my mind was like a Jeremy Sohan and a Sidy Cissoko. But maybe it would be better even because we saw this a little bit with Devin as a screener as the season went on. Because if you wanted to have like, if you did Devin and Jeremy, for example, you could have Jeremy roll and then Devin kind of fade off, off to the perimeter. So you have a shooter and then you have somebody going inside and then they just have to deal with Victor.
Yeah, it's deadly. I mean, Victor opens up so many options for us. It's crazy. Like I'm sure Pop has got so much stuff cooking that we haven't even seen yet. Um, and the amount of layups guys are getting recently in pick and roll situations with Wemby because there's just three dudes on Wembanyama, so they
Mm-hmm.
have wide open layups. That's another reason OKC was so rough because why? Of course, you're going to leave Zach Collins. You're never going to leave Victor Wembanyama. You know what I mean?
I totally get what you mean, Ethan. Oh my, I felt bad about saying that earlier, but it's just really we've seen it all year long. It's just night and day. The Spurs will get off to a hot start. They might even be leading by double digits, and then Victor gets subbed out, and then by the time he's back in, it's like an 8 to 10 point deficit.
Right. Ugh. Shame.
I found it, Ethan. This was the original one. Games with 5+ blocks this season. Victor Wembanyama 24. Rudy Gobert 3. That's 8 times as many.
That's quick math, Jude.
To be honest, I sent that to a friend and he said that.
Mm.
I'm not that good at math. I just remembered that he said that.
Well, in my mind, you did
We
it.
keep it real here.
That's right. That's right. We admit our mistakes. We admit when somebody else did the work for us.
But man, I mean, in that, like, come on, 21 more games
Yeah.
with 5 blocks. I
Like
know
I,
I know we're the Spurs. Like, I know we're the worst team in the West, but that's not Victor's fault.
it's not. It's not.
I get it though. It's a political award, like you
It
said,
is.
and it is semi-team award. It's always been that. Like you said, it's tough because probably maybe I mean I don't know. I don't know if 30. I don't know what the number of wins would be. To get him into that conversation to where he would be like the favorite. I'm not
Right.
exactly sure what that number would be, but maybe even like probably I'm thinking about it. It might need to be like less than 50 losses if I'm being honest. And I don't know if that's realistic,
I
but
think it might even be more so just the team itself being a top 10 defensive team, and then he has the argument because
I see what you're saying.
what are we in general, like 28th? Like we're bottom 5, like even with his rating being so high,
Mm-hmm.
like we're still awful because when he's not on the court it's just so bad. So that has really dragged down our team stats, which sucks.
Yeah, and that's where that gets into the team defense conversation. That's really what it has to do with, and that's why as much as it's Dom Beasy, and Dom Beasy is not an all-star either. We're not trying to say that about any of these guys that we're talking about necessarily. At least as of right now. Of course, Victor, but that's a different story. But like that's why it's like we're holding him out. It's just full tank.
Mm-hmm.
We already knew that, but it's just that's the biggest, like, if there's one thing that really, like, as we're here at the end of the season, the thing that sticks out to me is like the biggest thing the team needs to work on is team defense,
Oh, absolutely.
especially when he's off the floor.
Absolutely. I think there's just too many guys that individually aren't very good off the bench, to be frank, on defense. Like when you think of our weakest defenders, you think Malachi, You think Zach.
Mm-hmm.
Like Keldon's improved, but he's still not one of the best, so he's off the
Right.
bench too. And then Blake's a dog, but he's a small dog. And then who's our backup power forward, Mamu or Chetty, right?
Right.
Both are willing defenders, but physically deficient. So it's like, yeah, no kidding. Our bench defense sucks. Like all of our great defenders or good defenders are in the starting lineup.
I was missing some of the other comments down here, guys. I'm sorry. I didn't even see that there were a bunch. I had it like stuck like way earlier. But before we get to the comments, Ethan, not to completely go on a side note from what you were talking about, but I do have a story to tell.
Okay.
So I already told you this story, but I'm going to tell the people.
I like
I I went to Walmart right before this to get some groceries, and I saw there were actually a couple people I saw in some Spurs jerseys. The first guy I almost talked to, or I was just going to be like, "Go Spurs" or whatever. He was in a TP jersey. Shout out. He's in the old gray, so you know he's an OG.
Yeah.
No, but and then I saw another dude wearing a Victor shirt, and I'm like, okay, I gotta say what's up to this dude, because the other guy was just like he'd already walked past me, and so I just said what's up to him. We were just talking, you know what I mean? And he was like, yeah, it's crazy when you're 8 foot tall, what that does for you in basketball. But it was funny talking to him. It was kind of like a pulse of the fans, if you will. And then he was talking about Jeremy, and he was saying, he's like, I really like Jeremy. He's like, I know he's not always, doesn't have always the best offensive game, but he's going to lock down a bunch of dudes. And I was like, that's facts. But I was like, he has had some 30 and 10 games this year too. He's had a couple. And he was like, yeah, no, he can have some games where he does get going and in rhythm. And then as we're like going away, because we were going to different aisles, he goes, yeah, I hope we trade Keldon Johnson before his contract isn't worth it anymore. And I was just like, my man Keldon can't catch a break, dog. And the other thing that's funny about that, and if this guy ever watches it, shout out to you. It's nice having a conversation with you, and go Spurs go. But like, Keldon's contract gets cheaper.
Right. That's so true.
So it's like, even if his value goes down, like, so will his pay. So it doesn't, it was just, oh.
Man, I still don't fully understand the Keldon hate, dude.
Me
I don't
either.
understand why it's so profound. Like, there's always like a few fans or people that don't like certain players. Like, so be it. Like, you have a handful that hate Jeremy. I'm sure you have a handful that hate Trey, whatever, Devin too. But the Keldon hate just came out of nowhere, and it just took hold of so many people. And like, is he perfect? No, but is he the reason we're losing? Absolutely not. And is his contract absurd? No, it's not. Like you were saying, it's actually a really solid contract. So I don't know. What do you think?
No, I completely get what you're saying, and I mean, I remember going into Spurs Twitter Spaces a while back, and you know, I was just going in there to talk, and like the next, like the first person who spoke after me was just like going ham on Kelton. Like insanely. And what I was going to say too, when you're talking, I mean, there's so many games this year. You can go back to last year too. And obviously last year he was our leading scorer, and it was a completely different situation. But even this year, like when there's been some times where, like we just talked about, the team defense off the bench, him scoring has been the only way that we've been able to keep pace and like not lose our lead. We're not saying he's perfect. And another thing too, shout out to our guy Rob Trejo Jr. from Spurs Film Room way back in the day, had us on and really helped kind of stunt the growth of our channel. So always shout out to him. And he's been making some propel. My bad. Thank you.
Yeah.
I don't know. That was the complete wrong description.
You saw this, it was like, what? Yeah, just in case.
No, it helped propel the growth of our channel, spur the growth of our channel, if you will. He was talking about how one of the things that he mentioned kind of he's been making a couple podcasts recently. I haven't listened to his most recent one, but he made one before that, and I forget what it was titled, but he mentioned like the locker room and the Spurs culture stuff that Keldon does. Like he's like, I hope Keldon's here for a long time, you know, because of those things, but he's an actual basketball coach. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, even if it's just high school, like he understands those things a little bit more, you know, and the importance of having those type of guys, you know, on the team. So yeah, I'm not saying Keldon's perfect, but I am very happy with him as a 3 off the bench.
for sure. And I just want to add one more thing here. Like, it's one thing. I'm not calling out anybody that's ever thought of like, let's trade Keldon for somebody else. Like, it's one thing to consider him in a trade. Like, that's completely fine. But it's the people that
Like
just,
this.
yeah, right, exactly this. It's one thing to do that. Like, if you're thinking, how would we get Trey Young or how would we get Darius
Right.
Garland, and you want to throw him in there because you think that would be what it takes to make it work. That's completely fine. I do that too. But it's like it's the people that just hate him and just rag on him nonstop, and we're like, let's cut him, let's cut him. Like that. That's the stuff I think that Jude and I are talking about that we don't understand where that came from because he's got a lot of love for San Antonio. He did a lot of stuff for us last year, being the leading scorer, and like you brought up with Rob, he is the culture guy, and I think he's probably one of the leaders of this team. I would think he and Devin are kind of co-leaders right now. Maybe Wemby takes that spot down the road, but maybe not because the best player is not always the locker room leader. So I think Keldon has that voice at least for right now. So I think he's got a lot of hidden intangible value.
Yeah, for sure. And he's also the most tenured Spur on the roster as well.
Yeah, facts. Absolutely.
But with that being said, as we kind of talked about, and I was bringing up some comments as you were saying too, it's not like we're saying Keldon's untouchable either. No. You know what I mean? But there's not really anybody on the roster. I mean, other than we've talked about the three guys that we really would like to think of as untouchable, but probably if we're being just bluntly honest, the only person who's truly, truly untouchable, although I don't think we're trading Devin anytime soon after the contract we just gave him. And I don't think that would be the same for Jeremy either. But if we're being just like, you never know what offer could come through the door. If we're just being completely open-minded here, it's Wemby. You know what I mean? That's the one person who's truly like, we're not going to trade. And Spencer says Shaq is such a troll. Bull is more similar to Edie than he is to Vic. So I did get that right. I wasn't sure because I didn't watch the clip, but I saw the I saw like a headline on YouTube and some tweets about it.
Say what you will about Zach Edey. If he falls to the second round, I don't mind taking him. I don't think he will. I think someone will take him in the late first, but you know what I mean? Just like a big body, set some screens. Like we don't need him to.
Did you say Edie?
Edie, yeah.
Oh, no.
You don't want him?
Klingon or Klingon's probably going to go too high, but I'm not. No.
In the second round, you wouldn't take him?
Oh, in the second round?
In the second round.
Maybe in the second round. Yeah.
I don't even know if he'd fall that far, but usually guys like that always do. You know what I mean? Like guys that dominate March Madness but aren't necessarily built for the NBA. But you never know. Would you rather take? Okay, now this is just a dumb question, but I'm going to ask you anyway.
No, you're
Would
good.
you rather take Bronny James or Zach Edey if that was the two options?
Oh, Bronny.
Yeah, Bronny?
Yeah, and not because of potential or anything, just because of the chance of potentially getting LeBron.
That's fair.
And we do need a point guard and shooting. Yeah. I don't know if Edie's going to translate. That I feel like there's a chance he's Luka Garza 2.0.
That's the thing, right? I guess to me the high end would be like, I guess he's bigger and taller, but like a Steven Adams / like an Ivica Zubats, and then the low end is what you just said, Luka Garza or whoever else is really good in college. Oh, Frank Kaminsky, but obviously Frank's a different game, but like he was dominant in college and then has done absolutely nothing here.
Yeah, you brought up the Zubac comparison. That's who Kevin O'Connor from the Ringer, he does his mock draft. There was a Brian Windhorst article, and that was like the ceiling and floor for Wemby that we went over last year. But I love Kevin O'Connor's big boards. He has a lot of comparisons, and it's like the ceiling for Zach Edey is probably Zubac. And the other thing is in the injury, I believe this was the Memphis game with the injury to. Just with all the injuries, I'm sorry, I'm tripping over my words here. We played Zach and Wemby together for a little bit in that Memphis game, and it was the same thing, man. Like, and the only reason we did it was just, like I said, because of all the people that were out. But that's the other thing. Like, I don't know if if we want to put him next to a center, like if that's going to be the most effective thing for him. It seems like that might. I know Zach is maybe not the best example there. Maybe he'd look better next to as much as this sounds crazy or may sound crazy because we didn't get to see a full season from him, but maybe he looked better next to Charles Bassey.
Right.
for example, or something, or just another center other than Zach Collins. Maybe he looks better next to. But I kind of think, I kind of personally feel like we've been proven over this year
Mm-hmm.
that him playing the 4, as much as I was an advocate for it
Me
preseason, I was
too.
going hard on it. I think we've learned this year that it takes away from some of his skills,
Mm-hmm.
and limits him in a certain way.
I would agree with that. And just to spit this out, the only person I think, or two guys I think it might actually work next to Wemby at the center spot would be Bam Adebayo and Jaren Jackson Jr. Because they're both able to defend the perimeter a little bit, and they can both semi play 4-5 as well. So like it would kind of be positionless posts. Like we would just have two dominant defensive centers basically that are still mobile. That's like a dream scenario that I would like to see. I don't think we'd get either of those players. I don't think their teams are going to ever let them go. But it's just a kind of a fun thing to think about.
For sure. For sure. You're saying playing next to him?
Yeah, play right, like play at center with Wemby at the 4.
Yeah, but those are kind of different guys, and I'm sure you were talking about that. I was kind of looking at the comments here
No,
a
you're
little
good.
bit.
You're good.
But I see what you're saying there. But those are, they're more mobile. You know what I'm saying?
That's what I'm saying. Like
Yeah.
they're basically the same as Wemby, that they can kind of play 5 or 4. Obviously, Wemby's different because he puts the ball on the
Right.
floor and scoring. But next to Wemby, having two guys that dominant defensively would look kind of crazy.
Yeah, and Ace Spleen brings up, he says, I think Alex Sarr would be good too. Sarr at the 4 and Wemby at the 5. I completely agree with that. I have made one video a little while back on that. I haven't made any since, but honestly, I think we might we might do the prospect profiles after the draft. And as much as that was cool, I liked reacting to it because we can't show it on the screen. I think I'd rather just save the all the draft preview stuff, for then, because we're going to need content during that
Right.
time. And we'll see. The other thing we haven't mentioned, speaking of the draft, Ethan, the Toronto Raptors right now are at number 6, which would mean that if they got the 6th pick, that would mean that the Spurs would not get it because it's top 6 protected. But even though it's at the 6, there's still a significant chance that it falls out. And we'll see. I think they're locked into the 6th worst odds. The team after them is, I don't remember who it is. I need to go on Tankathon real quick. But the point that I'm trying to get to is that they're locked into the 6th worst odds. And the team that's at number 7 is like won too many games to where that's what it's going to be now. So that is there's still a chance, but it's really just going to come down to the lottery with that. But it's also not like the Raptors fell to 4 or 5, which I think earlier in the year, or just like a month or two ago, I was kind of wary of that happening after the trade deadline.
For sure. You never know. The draft lottery gods could bless us 2 years in a row, which has happened to other teams. So fingers crossed, knock on wood. The 6 is probably going to be at the 6, though. Get what I just did there?
I do see what you just did there. There's like multiple levels to that one, actually.
You like that? Thank you.
Because it's, Toronto, the 6.
Mm-hmm. That's why, exactly. That's why I did this.
And then it's the 6th thought. Oh my gosh. Anyways, Alex Sarr though, next to Victor, I definitely think that as much as we guard is a glaring thing that the Spurs going into this draft and just going into the offseason where you could see an upgrade. And Wing as well with Champagnie. I think his potential, and as well as the specific fit, as much as he's 7'1", he is similar to Jaren Jackson Jr. and Bam Adebayo in the sense that one, he can, even more closer to Jaren Jackson Jr. in his shooting, but in the way that he can move. He can move like a wing.
Fair enough.
Has a lot of length defensively, all that stuff.
The French, they don't have 2 towers, but I wish they did. Isn't Alexander Sarr French?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Is there two peaks in France?
No, I think you could just call them the Eiffel Towers, the twin Eiffel Towers. I don't know.
The Eiffel Tower and the tower is it's Italy, huh? I'm gonna say the Tower of Pisa.
I got the Eiffel Tower right.
Eiffel Tower's right. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. I was making sure after I said that. I was like, that's in France, right? I've not been in school in a minute.
Right. I don't know. I'll do some France research and I'll get back to you.
We will have to see. But Ethan, I think that about wraps up this episode. Thank y'all for being in the comments, giving us some good stuff to talk about. And yeah, I don't think we're going to be able to do either of these next two games, are we? Together, at least.
Probably not together.
Yeah.
I could probably do one. You could probably do the other. Something like that.
Yeah, like you could probably do the Nuggets game on Friday because you said you can't do the Detroit game, right?
No, I can do I think I can do the Detroit game.
Didn't you say? I think you said, I don't want to put out your business, but I think you have a significant event that you told me about. Yeah.
Oh, shoot. Yeah, I do.
Yeah. But you could probably do the Nuggets game if you wanted to on Friday. If not, no worries. But I'll probably do that. Don't worry about it. I'll probably do the that Detroit game on Sunday in a solo, just because that'll be a fun game. Ideally, hopefully.
I might be driving at that time, so if I am, I will listen in. I promise.
I appreciate it. But yeah, after that, guys, it's going to be full off-season mode. It's going to be full draft. I know that in some of our other streams, maybe we've been like, hey, we haven't looked into this prospect yet. But all of that stuff is going to be coming. And we're ready for it. And we're ready for the draft lottery as well. I don't know if we'll do another live stream. I think we will if the schedule permits.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's the end of the season. Hopefully we get a miracle, Ethan. I never thought I'd say this, but we need the Spurs to lose out and we need the Hornets to win one. That's really what the Spurs need in these last two games.
Please, lottery odds, please.
I know I was kind of wrapping it up there, but Alejandro Morales says ET equals Eiffel Tower, Alien equals Wemby. And I brought this up because the new logo for Victor, did you see that from Nike, Ethan?
It's sick. Yeah. That was a sick commercial. Marketing department needs a raise.
I got some inspiration. I know that, I've kind of been theming off of the City editions, and I definitely want to do that. But I kind of like the idea of maybe having some influence from Victor's logo for the next SSPN logo. And I'll leave it at that.
Say that quietly, and Nike's going to come kill us.
The crop circles are going to show up in my backyard.
Jude and I are about to be making tennis shoes in China for less than minimum wage and poor working conditions.
Oh gosh.
Can anybody speak English?
I have my Nikes and now I feel like a terrible person because you said that, Ethan.
It's all good.
Anyways, you know what's not terrible, Ethan?
What's that?
The SSPN community. We appreciate you guys. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe if you enjoyed the video. If you want to stay updated on all the content, you can follow us on Twitter at SSPNONYT, at Jude McLaren, and at Ethan_Quintero. We appreciate you guys. We'll catch you on the next one. Go Spurs, go.